Have you ever felt like something inside you is quietly breaking, and you don't even know why? Like life keeps moving forward, but your heart is stuck in a place that feels disconnected, numb, or worn thin. You smile when you have to. You push through your days. But deep down there's an ache you can't explain. It's not about being tired. It's not about being busy. It's something deeper, a spiritual weariness, a kind of quiet emptiness that no one else sees. And maybe you've tried to shake it. Maybe you've reached for distractions, accomplishments, people, noise, anything to fill the void. But nothing works, because this isn't a surface problem. It's a soul issue, and your soul is trying to tell you something. You need to reconnect with God. But here's the truth. Most people don't lose their connection with God in some big dramatic moment. It happens slowly, subtly, one rush morning, one missed prayer, one day where anxiety drowns out your faith, and before you know it, prayer becomes something distant, something you mean to do but never quite get to, something you know is powerful but feels hard to reach, and that's where the real battle begins. Because prayer isn't just a quiet moment, it's a lifeline. It's a fight for your peace, your clarity, your purpose. And when you stop fighting to pray, life starts to feel heavier. Confusion creeps in, fear grows louder. You lose your sense of direction, and nothing feels steady anymore. But what if this isn't the end of your story? What if you could turn it all around, not by doing more, not by being perfect, but by simply returning to what matters most? By choosing to show up, even tired, even unsure, even if your voice shakes. What if the breakthrough you've been waiting for is on the other side of prayer you've been putting off? Because here's the truth most people miss. God isn't far. He never was. He's been right there in the silence, in the waiting, in the struggle. And all he's asking is that you come back, not with the right words, not with a cleaned up heart. Just come back real, come back raw, come back ready to start again. This isn't about religion. This is about relationship. This is about you stepping into the presence of the one who knows you fully and still loves you completely. And if you stay with me, if you lean in through the next few moments, you're going to see how everything can begin to change. Your peace, your strength, your confidence, your joy. It's not as far away as it feels. But you have to fight to pray. You have to push past the distractions. You have to silence the noise. And once you do, once you reconnect with the God who made you, you'll realize something powerful. He's not done with you yet. He's just getting started, and your breakthrough starts now. If prayer was easy, everyone would be living with peace. Everyone would be walking in strength, rooted in purpose, unmoved by the storms that life throws at them. But that's not the world we live in. Most people are overwhelmed, exhausted, spiritually numb. Not because they're weak, but because they're under attack. There is a quiet war happening every single day. A war for your attention, for your thoughts, for your soul. And the first thing that war tries to steal is your desire to pray, not by force, but through distraction, discouragement, and doubt. The moment you decide to slow down and seek God, it's like everything rises up against you. Your phone buzzes. Your thoughts wander. Guilt creeps in. Suddenly you feel unworthy, unprepared, unable to even form the words. And that's not coincidence. That's a strategy, because if the enemy can keep you from prayer, he can keep you from power. But hear this, your struggle to pray is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that your prayer matters. It's proof that something sacred happens when you open your heart to God. You're not just saying words, you're entering into alignment with divine power. You're breaking chains in the unseen. You're shifting atmospheres within your own soul. That's why it's hard. That's why the resistance is so strong. Because when you pray, you stop being a passive observer of your life. And you start becoming a warrior in it. You take back territory. You remember who you are. You remind darkness that it does not have the final say over your mind, your emotions, or your future. This is the moment where you choose to stop waiting for the perfect feeling and start fighting for what you know is right. Because real change doesn't happen in the comfort zone. It happens in the tension. It happens when you feel like giving up, but you choose to press in. And even if your prayer is messy, even if it's broken and short and unsure, it still shakes heaven. It still reaches the heart of God. You don't need perfect words. You need a willing heart. You need the courage to show up, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because it is. Every time you pray, something moves. Sometimes inside you, sometimes around you, but always in a way that matters. So don't let the struggle stop you. Let it wake you up. Let it remind you that you are part of something bigger than what you see. Let it drive you to your knees, not in defeat, but in victory. Because the fight to pray is the fight for your future. And when you win that battle, everything begins to change. The fog starts to lift. Strength begins to rise. And you remember, you were never powerless. You were just disconnected. But now you're realigning. And that changes everything. You say you don't have time to pray, but the truth is you don't have time not to. Every day you delay it, the weight gets heavier, the noise gets louder, the pressure builds, and deep down, you feel it. Your soul is starving. You scroll, you rush, you multitask, and still, nothing fills the emptiness. That's not because you're failing. That's because your spirit is trying to survive without its source. You weren't created to handle life alone. You weren't designed to carry all that stress, anxiety, and fear without a place to release it. Prayer is that place. It's not just a spiritual practice, it's your oxygen. And right now, you're gasping for air in a world that keeps convincing you to hold your breath. When you believe the lie that prayer is optional, you settle for a life that feels shallow. You live reacting to everything instead of responding with strength. You try to fix things in your own power, but the more you push, the more drained you become. That's because you're fighting spiritual battles with physical tools. And it's never enough. You weren't made to live disconnected from the one who created you. The illusion that you can manage it all without God is the very trap that keeps you stuck. But once you realize this truth, that prayer is not a task, it's a weapon, you begin to see your life differently. You begin to understand that time spent in prayer is not time wasted. It's time multiplied. It's time redeemed. Everything changes when you stop seeing prayer as a burden and start seeing it as your breakthrough. When you protect that space, you start walking differently. You stop reacting to fear and start responding with faith. You stop drowning in overthinking and start living in clarity. Because in prayer, you don't just talk, you listen. You reset, you remember. And when your mind is clear, your steps are bold. That's how prayer transforms not just your situation, but your perception. It shifts your posture from panic to power, from doubt to trust, from survival to purpose. This is where real strength is born, not in trying harder, but in surrendering deeper. And surrender isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment you stop carrying what you were never meant to hold, and give it back to the one who can actually do something about it. When you make space for prayer, you're not avoiding your problems. You're inviting in the solution. You're inviting peace where there was tension. You're inviting answers where there was confusion. You're inviting hope where there was despair. That's not wasted time. That's the most powerful thing you can do. So stop waiting until life forces you to pray. Choose to pray before everything falls apart. Choose to make time, not find it. Choose to prioritize your soul over your schedule. Because when prayer becomes your first response, not your last resort, everything around you starts to align. And that alignment is the beginning of your transformation. You don't need to feel strong to pray. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be in a good mood or in the right mindset. What you need is the willingness to show up anyway. Because real faith is not about feelings, it's about choice. It's about standing in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the confusion, in the middle of the silence, and deciding that you will not back down, that you will not disconnect, that you will not give in to the pull of distraction or the weight of doubt. Because the moment you kneel, even in weakness, something shifts in the atmosphere. Not always around you, but always within you. And sometimes that inner shift is the miracle you've been waiting for. You may not realize it yet, but the decision to pray when you feel empty is one of the most powerful things you can do. It's not weakness. It's defiance. It's a declaration that your faith is bigger than your frustration, that your hope is louder than the noise, that your spirit refuses to let go of the promise, even when everything in you wants to. That's what changes things. That's what opens doors no one can shut. Not perfect prayers, but persistent ones. The kind that come from a soul that's tired, but still reaching. From a heart that's hurting, but still open. That's what heaven responds to. Not your polish, but your persistence. This is how God changes lives. Not always in an instant, but in the quiet decisions. In the unseen choices. In the moments no one else claps for, but heaven records. When you choose prayer over panic. When you choose presence over performance. When you choose to press in instead of shut down. That's where transformation begins. That's where strength is built. That's where healing takes root. Not always in a loud miracle, but in a consistent turning back. In a heart that keeps saying yes, even when everything inside says quit. And don't be fooled by the silence. Just because you don't hear an answer, doesn't mean nothing's happening. Sometimes God is working in the delay, stretching your faith, deepening your roots, preparing you for what's ahead. Prayer is not just about getting a result, it's about becoming someone who doesn't break under pressure. Someone who knows how to stand, how to wait, how to believe when it's hard. Someone who learns to walk with God not because life is easy, but because life is real, and God is faithful. So don't let the silence scare you. Let it strengthen you. Let it pull you closer, not push you away. Because when you pray, even when it's hard, you're not just surviving, you're growing. You're rising. You're aligning your life with something bigger than what you see. And the more you pray, the more you become unshakable. Not because everything changes around you, but because everything begins to change inside you. When you begin to change on the inside, your entire life starts to move in a new direction. Peace begins to take root where fear used to live. Clarity starts replacing the constant noise in your mind. You don't become perfect, you become anchored, grounded, focused. Not because your problems disappear, but because your perspective shifts. Prayer doesn't always remove the mountain, but it gives you the strength to climb it. It gives you endurance when your energy runs low. It gives you vision when everything around you feels dark. That kind of strength doesn't come from willpower. It comes from alignment, from choosing connection over control, from placing what you can't fix into the hands of the one who can. And as you keep choosing prayer, something even more powerful begins to unfold. You stop reacting to life from a place of fear. You stop letting emotions lead the way. Instead, you begin responding with wisdom, with faith, with patience. You become the kind of person who doesn't break at every setback. You develop the ability to be still in the chaos. And that stillness, it's not emptiness, it's power. The kind of power that can only be built in quiet places. That's what prayer produces in you. Not just comfort, but character. Not just relief, but resilience. That inner change becomes your foundation. It becomes the reason you can walk through the fire and come out stronger, not bitter. You were never meant to live at the mercy of circumstances. You were never meant to spend your days chasing peace that always feels out of reach. You were created for more. You were designed to live from a place of connection, and that connection is sustained through prayer. Not a task on your to-do list, but a habit of your soul, a rhythm that reminds you who you are and whose you are. Every time you pray, you make a decision that echoes far beyond that moment. You tell your fears they no longer own you. You tell your past it no longer defines you. You tell your future it's already in God's hands. And that kind of confidence doesn't come from motivation, it comes from communion. This is why you fight to pray, because your life depends on it, because your purpose requires it, because your peace is tied to it. You don't wait until you feel like it. You choose it when it's hard. You press in when it's quiet. And the more you do, the more your life begins to reflect something different. Not perfection, but power. Not control, but trust. Not fear, but faith. This is how change becomes real. Not in one emotional moment, but in a daily decision to stay connected, to stay grounded, to stay in prayer. Because when your heart is aligned with God, everything else begins to follow. And that alignment is what builds the life you were born to live. A life marked by strength, peace, and unshakable purpose. When your life becomes rooted in prayer, you stop chasing what can never satisfy. You stop looking for validation in places that can't hold your worth. You stop bending under pressure that was never meant to shape you. Prayer realigns your identity. It reminds you that you are not defined by your past, your failures, or even your current struggle. You are defined by who you belong to. And when that truth begins to sink into your soul, everything changes. You start walking like you know you carry divine strength. You speak like your words have weight. You move like your life has meaning, because it does. And prayer brings that meaning into focus. It sharpens your mind, softens your heart, and clears the fog that tries to cloud your path. Every battle you faced, every delay, every closed door, it didn't come to destroy you. It came to deepen you, to strip away the noise, to teach you to press in instead of giving up. Because when you pray through pain, you develop the kind of strength that can't be faked, the kind that holds steady in pressure. That kind of inner stability doesn't come by accident. It comes by surrender, by choosing connection with God over control of outcomes. It's in those moments, when your hands are open and your heart is exposed, that your life begins to shift. Not because everything around you is fixed, but because the foundation within you is fortified. The world tells you to hustle harder, to fix it all yourself, to hide your weaknesses and perform your strength. But you weren't called to perform, you were called to abide, to live in constant connection, to draw from a well that never runs dry. And prayer is that well. It's not just a moment of peace in the day. It's the lifeline that carries you through every high and low, the quiet force behind your courage, the hidden strength behind your calm, the power behind every choice to keep going. Don't underestimate what happens when you fight to stay in prayer. You're not just surviving your season, you're being shaped by it, you're being refined, your character is being forged, and what's being built in you now is preparing you for what's next. You may not see the full picture yet, but you don't need to. Your job is not to control the outcome. Your job is to stay connected to the one who sees it all, who knows your beginning, your middle, and your breakthrough. And the closer you stay to him, the more unshakable you become. This is the strength that doesn't fade when things get hard. This is the peace that holds you together when life tries to tear you apart. And this is the purpose that awakens when you decide you will no longer live disconnected. Because when you commit to a life of prayer, you step into alignment with who you were always meant to be. And that's when everything changes. When you step into alignment with who you were created to be, distractions lose their power. The temptations that used to derail you no longer carry the same pull. The opinions that once shaped your self-worth begin to fade into silence. Because now, your identity isn't built on applause or achievement. It's anchored in presence, in truth, in the quiet certainty that you are seen, known, and loved by the one who formed you. That kind of confidence can't be shaken by failure or inflated by success. It's rooted too deep, and that depth comes from prayer. Not just the words you say, but the consistency of showing up. Every day you choose to meet God in prayer, you are being rebuilt from the inside out. You don't need to pretend to be strong anymore. You don't have to hide behind performance or cover your pain with distractions. You were never meant to wear a mask. You were meant to come boldly, even broken. Because the power of prayer is not that you always walk away with what you want, it's that you never walk away the same. Every time you choose prayer over panic, connection over coping, surrender over striving, something in you is being healed, something in you is being restored. You may not feel it immediately, you may not see the shift right away, but the process is in motion, and what's growing in the quiet will soon be revealed in the strength of your steps. The change that lasts doesn't come from willpower, it comes from encounter. It comes from intimacy with God that strengthens your spirit in ways no motivational hype ever could. You begin to notice a peace that makes no sense on paper, a calm that isn't tied to your circumstances, a confidence that shows up when everything else says you should be afraid. That's the result of staying in prayer, of showing up when it's hard, of choosing faith when it would be easier to numb, escape, or retreat. This is how real courage is born, not in avoiding the storm, but in learning how to stand in the middle of it without being moved. There's a kind of transformation that can only happen when you stop running, when you stop delaying, when you finally decide that your healing, your freedom, your purpose are worth the fight, that your spiritual life matters more than your social feed, that your inner world deserves attention before the outer world steals your focus. Prayer sharpens that focus. It clears the fog. It shows you who you really are beneath all the noise, the fear, and the pressure. And once you see it, you can't go back. You can't keep living disconnected and expect to thrive. Because now you know. Now, you've tasted what it means to be in alignment, and once you've touched that peace, that power, that purpose, you'll never settle for less again. You were made for this kind of life, one built in prayer, one led by faith, one that never backs down. There is a version of you waiting to be revealed, stronger, clearer, more grounded. Not the one shaped by fear, not the one hiding behind doubt or shrinking under pressure. The real you, the one created with purpose, built with resilience, and called to rise. That version of you doesn't emerge through comfort. It's refined through commitment, through daily decisions to quiet the noise and return to the source, to stop searching for answers in empty places and start seeking the presence that transforms everything. Prayer isn't an escape from reality. It's the key to confronting reality with strength. It doesn't remove the weight, but it changes the one who carries it. It grows something unshakable in you, clarity, courage, conviction. You don't have to wait for life to calm down to begin. You don't need ideal conditions. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to start. Start where you are. Start in the middle of your mess. Start even if your voice shakes. Start even if you don't know what to say. Because when you begin to pray, you start to unlock something that was buried under the weight of trying to do it all alone. You reconnect with truth. You remember who walks with you. And that remembrance becomes power. It becomes vision. It becomes the reason you keep moving forward when quitting would be easier. The world will always offer distractions. It will always give you reasons to delay, to scroll, to numb, to stay disconnected. But the more you disconnect from your creator, the more confusion grows. And confusion breeds anxiety, doubt, and fear. You were never meant to live in that fog. You were created for clarity. And clarity begins when you return to the source. When you turn off the noise and turn your heart toward God, not as a last resort, but as your first move. Not because you have to, but because you finally understand that prayer is not a burden. It's a breakthrough. This is where transformation becomes real. Not because your circumstances instantly change, but because your posture shifts. You're no longer begging life to get easier. You're becoming stronger. You're no longer chasing temporary highs. You're anchored in something eternal. You're no longer walking blind. You see now, with eyes of faith, with a heart awake, with a mind focused on what truly matters. And that clarity, that inner power, that's what sets you apart. That's what sustains you when the pressure rises. That's what equips you to lead, to love, to live with intention in a world that pulls people in every direction. You were not created to wander in circles. You were made to walk in purpose. And prayer is the compass. It keeps you aligned. It pulls you back when you drift. It steadies your steps when the road is rough. And the more you return to that place, the more you discover that everything you need was never outside of you. It was within, waiting to be awakened. You were never meant to live in pieces, scattered by fear, broken by pressure, divided by doubt. Deep within you is a longing for wholeness, a longing to feel steady when everything shakes, a longing to feel seen, even when no one's watching. That wholeness is not found in people's approval, in busy routines, or even in accomplishments. It's found in alignment. It's found in the presence of God. And the door to that presence is prayer, not religious performance, not memorized words, but honest, soul-deep connection. The kind of prayer that silences shame. The kind that lifts your head even when your heart is heavy. The kind that reminds you are not alone in this fight. It's easy to forget your power when you're overwhelmed. Easy to feel small when life keeps coming at you from all sides. But even in those moments, especially in those moments, you are not powerless. You have a choice, a holy, sacred, life-changing choice, to pray when everything in you wants to panic, to breathe when everything screams to run, to speak life when everything around you looks dead. That choice rewires your heart. It teaches you that peace is not a product of comfort, but of connection. That victory is not always loud, but often silent, one on your knees, in the dark, with no one watching but God. The fight to stay in prayer is not just about what you're asking for, it's about who you're becoming. You are becoming rooted, steady, clear, focused. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop shrinking and start standing. You stop settling and start rising. Because you're no longer just living from survival, you're living from strength. The kind of strength that doesn't break when pressure builds. The kind that doesn't fold when people walk away. Because it wasn't built on opinions. It was built in prayer. You don't need a perfect background or a flawless record to enter into that place. You just need a willing heart. God meets you in your weakness. He moves through your surrender. He doesn't wait for your perfection. He responds to your persistence. Every time you return, even if you failed the day before, He meets you. And every meeting strengthens your spirit. Every moment spent in His presence realigns your perspective. You stop magnifying the problem and start magnifying the promise. You stop asking how you'll make it through and start declaring that you will. The enemy wants you silent, distracted, exhausted, because he knows that when you pray, heaven listens and hell trembles. But you weren't made to back down. You were made to rise. You were made to fight, not with anger or fear, but with truth, with love, with unshakable faith. And the fight begins the moment you choose to speak, to believe, to press in. No matter what it looks like, no matter how you feel, this is your ground. This is your weapon. This is your breakthrough. And it begins with prayer, always. You don't need to feel strong to start praying. You only need to be willing. Willing to drop the armor. Willing to come as you are, even if that means coming tired, confused, or afraid. Because the greatest transformations don't begin in moments of power. They begin in moments of honesty. When your soul gets quiet enough to say, I can't do this on my own anymore, that's when the shift begins. Not because you found the strength, but because you finally stop pretending. And that moment of surrender becomes the spark that lights your way back to peace, back to clarity, back to purpose, back to the voice of God that was never silent, only crowded out. There's something powerful that happens when you make prayer your first response instead of your last resort. The chaos outside doesn't magically disappear, but the storm inside begins to calm. Your mind, once cluttered with fear and doubt, starts to find order. Your heart, once guarded and tense, starts to soften. Because in prayer, you remember that control was never the goal. Trust is. And trust doesn't mean understanding every step. It means choosing to keep walking, even when the path isn't clear, even when the answer doesn't come right away, even when the breakthrough feels far off, because your faith isn't built on what you see, it's built on who you know. You know you weren't made for fear. You know you weren't created to crumble under pressure. Deep down there's a part of you that still believes you're made for more. That part needs to be protected. It needs to be fed. It needs space to breathe. That's what prayer does. It clears space. It makes room for your spirit to speak louder than your fear. It reminds you that the same power that raised the sun this morning is the power that lives in you. You've spent too long chasing validation, chasing distractions, chasing noise. But now is the time to anchor, to root yourself in something unshakable, something that doesn't rise and fall with circumstances. Prayer is not a ritual. It's a lifeline. It is the difference between surviving and thriving, between drifting and living with purpose, between barely hanging on and rising with new strength. You don't have to wait until you feel holy. You don't have to wait until you have it all together. The invitation is now. The door is open now. All you have to do is enter. Come with your questions. Come with your doubts. Come with your exhaustion. Just come, because every step you take toward God is a step away from fear, a step away from confusion, a step away from the lies that told you you're not enough. You are enough. You are seen. You are chosen. And you are ready. Not because you feel it, but because you've decided it. This is the moment you stop shrinking. This is the moment you rise. And it all begins with a whisper, a prayer, a choice. You were never meant to battle life on your own strength. That's why your soul feels tired when you try to carry it all alone. You're not weak for feeling weary. You're human. And being human means you need connection to something greater than yourself. You weren't built to run endlessly, to prove constantly, to fix everything on your own. That constant striving drains your spirit and numbs your clarity. But when you begin to pray, when you choose to sit in the presence of God instead of rushing through life, something begins to change. You realize that peace isn't something you chase, it's something you receive. It comes when you pause, when you breathe, when you lift the weight that was never yours to carry and place it in the hands of the one who never fails. Prayer is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's how you train your heart to listen when your mind is screaming. It's how you learn to trust when the path ahead looks uncertain. It's how you regain your strength when everything feels like too much. And even when you don't know the words, even when all you have is silence or tears, your surrender still speaks. God hears what your voice can't say. And in that holy space, when you show up just as you are, you start to rise again. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because you finally stopped pretending that you had to be the one holding it all together. You are allowed to need help. You are allowed to feel broken. You are allowed to stop trying to be perfect. That's where grace meets you, not at your peak, but in your lowest, most real moments. Grace is not earned, it's given. And when you pray, you open the door for that grace to flood in and rewrite everything. Your mindset begins to shift. You stop identifying with the pain and start identifying with the promise. You stop carrying shame and start standing in truth. You begin to see that your worth was never tied to how well you perform. Your worth was sealed by the one who formed you with purpose and breathed life into you with intention. There is power in your prayer, even if no one else sees it. There is strength in your stillness, even if the world tells you to keep running. There is clarity waiting on the other side of your obedience. Don't underestimate what's happening in the silence. God does his deepest work in hidden places. What feels like waiting is actually building. What feels like stillness is actually strength being renewed. Every time you show up in prayer, you are becoming more aligned, more anchored, more awake. You are remembering who you are and whose you are. You are stepping out of survival and into purpose. And the more you return to that sacred place, the more you'll realize you were never stuck. You were being prepared to rise, prepared to walk with authority, prepared to live fully alive. You were being rebuilt from the inside out, not patched up, not temporarily fixed. Rebuilt, foundation first. And that kind of rebuilding doesn't come from external changes. It begins in the stillness where your spirit meets truth, where your pride bows, where your wounds surface, where your fears lose their grip. That stillness isn't comfortable. It exposes the noise you've lived with for too long. The noise of doubt, of comparison, of unmet expectations. But in that raw space, transformation begins. Because God doesn't bless the image you pretend to be. He blesses the person you truly are. The one willing to get honest. The one who dares to break before trying to look strong. The one who whispers, I'm here, and I'm ready. This is where power is born, not in performance, but in presence. Prayer aligns you with reality, not fantasy. It reminds you that faith doesn't remove your humanity. It gives it direction. It gives your weakness purpose. It gives your struggle a reason to keep going. Because now you're not moving just to escape pain. You're moving toward destiny, toward healing, toward the version of you who no longer doubts their worth. That version has always existed. You've just been distracted. But every moment you choose connection over chaos, that version gets stronger, bolder, louder. You remember that your identity isn't rooted in your pain. It's revealed through your perseverance. You've been searching for a breakthrough. But maybe what you need isn't something outside of you. Maybe it's the courage to stop running and stand still, to face the fear you keep outrunning, to stare down the lie that tells you you're not enough. That lie loses its power when you enter prayer. Because prayer reveals the truth that nothing can disqualify what God has already called. You are not your past. You are not your mistakes. You are not your failures. You are chosen. You are called. You are already loved, not for what you do, but for who you are. And that truth doesn't just heal. It sets you free. Freedom isn't found in a perfect life. It's found in surrender. The kind of surrender that says, I don't have all the answers, but I trust the one who does. That kind of faith shakes the ground beneath fear. It silences the voice of shame. It opens the path to purpose. And every time you choose to pray, Even when it's hard, even when it's silent, even when it feels like nothing is changing. You are planting seeds of breakthrough. Seeds that grow in places unseen. Seeds that will one day rise into strength, into wisdom, into peace that the world can't give and can never take away. Don't stop now. Don't give up because it feels slow. Your faith is not in the speed. It's in the source, and that source is faithful. Always. Every time you choose to press on when nothing around you changes, you are building strength that the world cannot see but heaven celebrates. That hidden strength matters. It's what holds you steady when your emotions try to pull you off course. It's what keeps your heart soft when bitterness tries to take root. And it's the quiet voice that tells you, even when no one else notices, that you are not forgotten. You are never invisible to God. The delay is not denial. The silence is not rejection. It is preparation. And sometimes, the most powerful breakthroughs begin in the places where you feel the most overlooked. You may feel like nothing is working, but what if that frustration is revealing what was never meant to last? What if God is not punishing you, but protecting you, redirecting you, lifting you from what you thought you needed, and leading you to something greater? That pain you feel, it's not a wall, it's a doorway into something deeper, purer, stronger. But you can't carry old weight through a new door. You have to release what you've been holding onto so tightly. The fear of failing, the obsession with being enough, the pressure to prove your worth. You were not created to live in tension. You were created to walk in trust. And trust doesn't mean you won't feel afraid. It means you no longer allow fear to control your next step. Peace is not found in understanding everything. It's found in believing that even when you don't see the whole picture, God does. And that belief isn't passive, it's powerful. It changes how you show up. It shapes how you think, how you speak, how you respond. You stop reacting out of panic and start moving with purpose. You stop begging for answers and start standing on truth. That is the power of prayer. It doesn't just change your situation, it transforms you for the situation. It trains your mind to see through the lens of faith instead of fear. And that shift is everything. There is a new strength rising in you right now. A strength not based on hype, but on hope. Hope that stays when the world walks away. Hope that holds on when everything feels like it's falling apart. Hope that whispers, keep going, when the loudest voice says, you're done. You are not done. You are in the middle of becoming. And becoming is messy, it's uncertain, but it's worth every moment of discomfort. Because what God is building in you is greater than what you've lost. It's deeper than what you've prayed for. And it will last longer than the pain you're walking through. This is your season to stop shrinking, stop doubting, and stop waiting for everything to be perfect. Stand up, speak life, believe boldly, and keep praying like the answer is already on its way. Because it is. You are not waiting on a miracle. You are walking through one. Every breath you take is evidence that God is not finished with you. If you were meant to be broken forever, you would have stayed down. But something inside you keeps reaching. Something unshaken keeps fighting. That's not weakness. That's your spirit refusing to surrender to the lies that tried to bury you. It's proof that even when your faith feels small, your purpose is still massive. The fire you feel right now, the struggle, the confusion, the silence, it's burning away everything that cannot stay with you in your next season. You are being refined, not rejected, pruned, not punished. You don't need to perform to be seen by God. You don't need to explain yourself, prove yourself, or earn approval. You already have it. You are already enough, because the one who made you doesn't make mistakes. You were created with intention, on purpose, for purpose. And when you pray, you're not just sending words into the air. You're aligning with the very power that formed you. You're reminding your mind that you're not alone, that you were never meant to carry life's weight by yourself. Prayer is not a last resort. It's your first weapon. It's your oxygen in the storm. It's the anchor that keeps you from drifting when everything around you screams chaos. There's power in quiet obedience. The world tells you that results define you. But God sees your heart. He sees the nights you cried and still chose to show up. He sees the moments you gave, even when you felt empty. He honors what others overlook. And when you commit to the secret place, when you fight to pray even when it feels hard, you unlock a strength that can't be shaken. It may not be loud. It may not be dramatic. But it's real. And it's working. You're growing even when you can't see it. You're healing even when it still hurts. You're moving forward even when it feels slow. Stop waiting for a perfect day to believe. Stop waiting for evidence to trust. God doesn't need ideal conditions to move. He moves in deserts, in dry places, in broken hearts. He moves when you don't feel worthy. He moves when you're at the end of yourself. That's where His glory begins. When you release the need to control everything, peace rushes in. And that peace doesn't just comfort, It carries you. It strengthens your hands. It clears your mind. It fuels your purpose. You've come too far to go back. There is more ahead than behind you. Every setback, every delay, every unanswered prayer is being woven into something beautiful. You don't have to understand it all to trust it. You just have to keep showing up, keep believing, keep praying like God is already in the room. Because He is. And when you pray from that place, you stop surviving and start living. You stop doubting and start declaring. You stop fearing and start fighting. This is your time. Don't turn back now. If your heart is still beating, your purpose is still breathing. It doesn't matter how many times you've fallen, doubted, or questioned. You are still chosen, still called, still equipped for something bigger than the pain that tried to define you. The world may have labeled you by your past, but heaven speaks your future. And that future is not small. It's not survival, it's victory. But victory doesn't come from comfort, it comes from surrender. It comes from those raw, unfiltered moments where you drop the mask, lift your hands, and admit you don't have all the answers. That is where transformation begins, not in control but in release, not in perfection but in presence. God isn't asking you to fix everything. He's asking you to give Him access, to open your heart even if it's bruised, to speak even when your voice shakes, to pray not because you feel strong, but because you're finally ready to stop carrying what was never yours to carry. When you pray, you're not escaping life. You're engaging it with a new power. You are stepping into partnership with the Creator of it all. And when that happens, fear loses its grip, worry loses its weight, shame loses its voice, because God doesn't need your perfection. He wants your presence. He wants your heart. Even the messy parts, especially the messy parts. You may not see the breakthrough yet, but the foundation is shifting. The atmosphere is changing. Every whispered prayer is echoing louder than your doubt. Every tear cried in faith is watering the seeds you thought had died. But nothing God plants in you goes to waste. He doesn't start what He won't finish. He doesn't call what He won't cover. And He doesn't promise what He won't provide. Your job isn't to know the whole plan. Your job is to keep showing up with a surrendered spirit and a determined soul. To keep praying when it's quiet. To keep trusting when it's hard. That kind of faith moves mountains. Not because of the size of your belief, but because of the one you're believing in. This is not about feeling inspired for a moment. This is about building a life that doesn't fall apart when the wind blows. A life rooted in truth, in discipline, in spiritual fire. You have to fight for that. Fight to pray when distractions scream louder. Fight to worship when your heart feels numb. Fight to believe when your mind is flooded with doubt. That fight is sacred. It's not weakness. It's war. And every time you choose to rise when it would be easier to quit, you're not just changing your situation, you're changing your spirit. You're training your soul to lean on a strength that's not your own. That's where the real power is. That's where peace is born. Not in a perfect life, but in a life completely surrendered. You don't need easy. You need unshakable. And unshakable begins with prayer. The reason you feel resistance every time you try to pray is because the enemy fears what happens when you do. Hell trembles when a soul finds its knees, because prayer isn't passive. It's power unleashed. It's the sound of faith rising above fear. The voice of a heart refusing to bow to darkness. When you decide to pray despite the pressure, despite the fatigue, despite the confusion, you are stepping into divine authority. You are shaking chains that have clung to generations. You are shifting not only your present, but the trajectory of your future. You're not just surviving another day. You're pushing back against every lie that told you this was the end. There is a battle for your focus, for your peace, for your joy. The moment you try to realign with heaven, distractions will scream louder. Doubts will grow stronger. But these aren't signs that you're failing. They're signs you're threatening the enemy's grip. Spiritual warfare intensifies when you're getting closer to breakthrough. So don't misinterpret resistance as rejection. Don't confuse silence with abandonment. When God is silent, He is strengthening. When the path is hard, He is preparing. Faith doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in struggle. And prayer isn't about changing God's mind. It's about aligning your spirit with His purpose. You might not feel anything when you pray. That doesn't mean it's not working. Emotions are not evidence of effectiveness. The most powerful prayers are often prayed through clenched teeth and tear-filled eyes. Not loud, not eloquent, just real, sincere, honest. God doesn't need you to impress Him. He just wants you to involve Him, bring Him into the mess, invite Him into the madness. Because when you do, you give permission for divine power to enter human struggle. That's when miracles begin. Not always in a flash, but often in small shifts, in renewed minds, in unexpected peace, in the strength to do today what yesterday crushed. You were never created to carry everything alone. You were created to commune, to lean, to depend. And prayer is your lifeline. It's not your last resort. It's your first weapon, your most powerful move, not because you know the outcome, but because you trust the one who holds it. Every time you choose prayer over panic, you're training your mind to seek peace. Every time you pray instead of quit, you're building resilience. That is how transformation begins. Quietly, persistently, deeply, and in time, undeniably. You are not weak for needing help. You are wise for knowing where your strength comes from. It's not your willpower that will carry you. It's your willingness to stay connected, to keep speaking when it feels pointless, to keep showing up even when the fire dims. That kind of faith builds a life that hell can't break. And right now, you're being invited into that. Not just to pray when it's easy, but to pray until it changes you, because that change is coming, and it begins the moment you refuse to give up.